To display a decorative line below the clickable text, we need to use absolute position, relative position, and z-index together. Therefore, we've decided to take this opportunity to clean some dead corners for you. Before this class, you might have thought you were already very familiar with relative position, absolute position, and z-index, but after this class, you'll be surprised of how little you knew about them. So get your pen and notebook ready and be prepared to be surprised. First, let's relearn the relationship between inline tags and line height. Let's create an A tag and set a background color to it. We can see the range of the background color is exactly the same as the clickable text. If we set line height to the A tag, the location of the clickable text will be pushed downward due to the bigger line height, but the range of the background color stayed the same. But if you try P tag, things will be different. The line height will directly contribute to the range of the background color. So let's assign absolute position to the A tag. Have you found any differences? After we've set absolute position to the A tag, the line height will be able to contribute to the size of the background color. If we remove the absolute position setting, the range of the background color will go back to its original size. By default, a child's DIV's width is the same as its parent DIV. But if we set the child DIV to absolute position, then its width will be the same as its contents. If the child DIV is empty, then its default width will become 0. Next, let's clean the dead corner of z-index. Let's create 3 DIVs. We set the first one to absolute position, and we can see the first DIV is now flying on top of the second and third DIV. Out-of-flow elements fly higher than normal flow ones. We set the second DIV to relative position and keep the third one in a static position. Now attention, until this moment, we've not used the z-index yet. Refresh the page and get ready to be surprised. Relative position keeps selected elements in normal flow, but this does not mean relative position will have a 0 influence to the selected element. The static position DIV is still below the absolute positioned one, but the relative position DIV is now displayed on top of the absolute position DIV. This result is quite surprising. The conclusion is, absolute positioned will cover static positioned elements defined behind it, but it will not cover relative positioned ones. Next, let's try z-index. If we set z-index to the absolute position DIV and set its value to 1, we can see the absolute position DIV is back to the top again. Next, let's set z-index to the static position DIV. We can see nothing happened. This means z-index does not work with static positioned elements. What about assigning z-index to the relative position DIV? We can see z-index works on relative positioned elements. We've cleared the dead corners. Next, let's figure out how to create the decorative line and the hyperlink. First of all, we only need one decorative line, not 2. Don't be misled by its appearance. We set a white background to the clickable text and move it to the center of the decorative line. The white background will cover the middle part of the line. Whenever you need to put one page element on top of another one, you'll usually need absolute position and z-index for that job. Wherever absolute position is involved, relative position will be needed as well. First, let's create a parent DIV. Naturally, this parent DIV needs to be set to relative position. Then we create a hyperlink using the A tag, but for now we put the A tag outside the parent div. Next, we create a decorative line using another div. Still, we put the decorative line outside the parent div for now. We set the div's top border to 1 pixel solid. Now all the page elements are ready. The next step is to move the hyperlink into the horizontal and vertical center of the parent div. This is simple. We assign text-align to the parent div and set its line height to the same value as its height. Then we move the A tag into the div. Refresh the page, and we can see that the clickable text is now in the vertical and horizontal center of the parent div. Next, we move the decorative line into the parent div. Here's a question for you. Should we put a decorative line before the A tag or after the A tag? For now, we put the decorative line behind the A tag. To move the decorative line to be under the hyperlink, we first need to set its absolute position. This also means that we need to set the decorative line's width to 100%, because once you absolute a child div, its default width will be generated by its contents, not its parent div. Next, we need to set the hyperlink to relative position. The last step would be moving the decorative upward to the vertical center of the parent div. At this moment, the decorative line has just been set to absolute position, and its parent div has been set to relative position. Things can't get any better. All we need to do is assign top 50% to the decorative line. We can see the decorative line has been lifted upward. The last step would be moving the decorative line under the clickable text using the z-index. We set the A tag's z-index to 99 and decorative line's z-index to 9. And that's it. What do you think would happen if we put the decorative line before the A tag? We can see that nothing's changed, the result is still the same. But what do you think would happen if we remove the two z-index settings? Will the decorative line go back to the top of the clickable text? Well, we can see that even if we remove the two z-index settings, the clickable text is still on top of the decorative line. If you can't understand why, review the previous lesson where I cleaned the dead corners of absolute position and relative position.